listening to Commuting with the Rabbi.
Welcome back to Commuting with the Rabbi, a podcast to bring meaning, connection, and purpose to your journey. I'm your host, Rabbi Joel Mosbacher, and this episode is brought to you by Temple Sh'arei Tefillah, now celebrating its 175th year, a spiritual home to all who seek meaning, connection, and purpose. We're located at 250 East 79th Street and 2nd Avenue in New York City. I'd like to start out today by telling you about a recent trip that I took with a group of teens to Prague and Terezin. We divided the trip into two parts, essentially. In the first part, we were focused on just seeing a beautiful European city. Prague is a great city and also not too large. It's about 1.3 million people. So in a few days, you can visit much of the city and much of the highlights. We visited the Charles Bridge. We went up the Patron Tower. We saw the astronomical clock. And so part one was really about seeing this beautiful city and learning about its history. We saw castles and churches. Part two of the trip was focused on the 1,000 years of Jewish life in Prague. And so we spent an entire day in the Jewish quarter, visiting several synagogues there, learning about the history of Jewish life in this city, seeing an ancient cemetery, visiting and hearing the story of Rabbi Judah Lowy in the Altneu Shul, and learning the story of my favorite Jewish mythical character, the Golem, and how that was a creature that, according to this myth, the Golem was built by Rabbi Lowy to save the Jewish people in a time of trial and challenge. When we traveled to Terezin, which was a transportation camp that the Nazis used during World War II to hold Jews on their way to death camps, the kids reacted so powerfully to the life that Jews lived there, and to the experience, and to the art and music and theater that they created there, and also were deeply impacted by the fact that the thousands of Jews who spent time at Terezin, most of them didn't survive the Holocaust. In the end, some 30,000 Jews died in Terezin, mostly of illness and starvation, but it wasn't a death camp. The hardest part in some ways was standing on the remains of the railroad tracks that led from Terezin to places like Auschwitz. Terezin is unusual in the sense that because people spent sometimes months and even years there, there was an entire kind of culture that grew out of that space. And the idea that Jews, in the midst of the fear they were experiencing, because they knew where they were headed eventually, despite that, they were able to create art and music and poetry and an opera in that life, I think was powerful for me to see and hear, and powerful for our kids to see and hear, and inspiring. It speaks of the indomitable spirit of humanity. Sh'arei Tefillah is a place that has lots of travel experiences for teens and for adults and families. I'd like to put in a plug for our family Israel trip, which is taking place from August 26th to September 6th. This is really the last chance to sign up. We have a great group of families already going. If you're interested, you should contact me or Andrew Paul right away. We'd love to travel with you.
Okay, everybody, stand by for the interview.
It's my privilege to welcome to the podcast our senior cantor, Todd Kipnis. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be the senior cantor of Sh'arei Tefillah?
Sure. So my last year of cantorial school, I was an intern here, and I actually remember interviewing for that position while doing my fourth year in Israel, and I was in my kitchen in Israel interviewing on the phone, and then time came to rank where I wanted to go for my internship, and who would have thought where that led me. So then when I was graduating from cantorial school, initially there wasn't an assistant cantor position open here, and then eventually they decided they wanted me to stay, and so they They were still in search for a senior cantor at the time, and so they offered me an assistant cantor position, which I wasn't eligible yet to be the senior cantor. And so then I've been here since.
Tell us where you're from, where you went to school before you went to HUC.
So I'm from Massapequa on Long Island. I went to school at Ithaca College for voice performance. I was pursuing a career in opera. After I graduated from Ithaca, I went to the Tri-Cities Opera in Binghamton, New York, where they train young opera singers. And so I had the opportunity to do lead roles with the opera company and grow as a performer and singer there. And while I was there, they have a joint program with Binghamton University where you can get your master's in opera and take classes at Binghamton University while performing with the opera company there. So I got my master's in opera while I was there. While I was there, I got involved singing at a Reform synagogue in Binghamton, Temple Concord in Binghamton, and the rabbi there, Rabbi Lance Sussman, kept encouraging me to consider the cantorate.
Was there a moment like, this is the thing? Was there a moment like that for you?
There actually was, and it's the most minuscule moment. So I didn't have a cantorial role model growing up, and so I was kind of thinking, who am I to be a cantor? I'm just a regular person. And even though I felt like it would be a good thing for me, and my family all felt that it would be a good thing for me, and I knew vocally I had the potential. I knew that Judaism was important to me. And what happened was there was another woman who was singing with me at Temple Concord who was getting her undergraduate degree at Binghamton University. There was one Friday night where she found out she had been accepted to cantorial school. And so Rabbi Sussman had her come up to the bima, and they sang Siman Tov to her. And then afterwards he said, "Todd, no pressure." But that wasn't the moment. The moment was actually after the service. One of the congregants who I had gotten to know said to me, "Why did the rabbi say that? Are you thinking about being a cantor?" And I said, "Well, I've thought about it." And she said, "Well, it seems like it would fit really well with your personality." And it was hearing my personality, not just my voice, clicked. And I'm like, maybe this is who I am. Maybe this does fit with who I am. And the woman was right. I couldn't have imagined loving what I do as much as I do.
What do you love most about being a cantor?
So without a doubt, it's the relationships that I form with people. I feel I have very deep connections with people here of all ages, and that's by far the thing that I value the most. Of course, coming from a musical background, anytime I'm leading worship or doing any kind of singing and doing concerts, that is also a passion of mine and something I enjoy. But it's the relationships that is the most important to me.
What's most challenging about being a cantor?
I would say, in part, the work-life balance. The schedule of a cantor, it's actually funny. I used to talk to my dad about how I didn't want to be a traveling opera singer because my dad coached my baseball games and was very involved in my sports growing up. And so I said, I want to be able to coach my kids' baseball games. But as a cantor, you can't do that either. So,
Well, you and Becky are raising two great kids, so I think you're doing it right.
Thank you.
Is there just a liturgical piece that when you're singing it, you still feel moved, even if it's something that you've sung bunches of times before?
So Samachti Be'omrim Li, that we do on Yom Kippur afternoon. And I know when we've talked through cues and figured out, what should we leave in, what should we not, even though thematically maybe we don't need it, I just love that piece of music. So I always advocate for us leaving it in there. And it's not just that the music is beautiful, which it's gorgeous. It's also that it holds a special place to me because in my cantorial class, and I think for most of the cantorial classes, it kind of becomes an anthem of the class that we sing many times at HUC. And my class sang it at our graduation, at our ordination from Hebrew College. So it holds a special place to me.
I love that. What do you listen to secular music-wise? Do you have a genre of music that you listen to that might surprise people?
I love 80s music.
All right.
And the story I love to tell is how growing up, my dad loved 50s and 60s rock and roll music. And growing up on Long Island, there was a radio station, 101.1 WCBS FM, and it played old rock and roll music. And I would sit in the back and I would be like, can we listen to my music? The music of the 80s at the time when I was growing up. And now that same station plays only 80s music. And my kids sit in the back and say, can we listen to our music? And I say, no, we're listening to mine now.
Is there a musical act from the 80s that if you could get tickets to or go back in time, you'd love to go to?
Billy Joel. I've never
Nice.
seen him live, and I'm a huge fan of his music. I had his greatest hits that I listen to all the time.
You spoke about the work-life balance piece, and there are moments in our lives when our personal life and our professional life overlap. I know that you're in the period of mourning for your dad, and I'm wondering if you would be willing to share a little bit about what it's like to be a mourner as someone whose life's work in part is bringing comfort to other people. What's it like for you to be the mourner?
So I'd say, first of all, that the outpouring of love and support from this community, especially right after my dad died, was unbelievably overwhelming and touching for me, and how the congregation was here for me. And then seeing how much that helped me makes me realize the impact that we can have on people by being there for them, and understanding a little more what people are feeling. I would go to a shiva or go to visit someone or speak to someone who was mourning the loss of a loved one, and they would be laughing, or they would seem okay. And I'd be like, okay, they're doing okay. But I know that now, when you're around people, you can be laughing. But then when you're in the quiet of by yourself, it's something different. And you can't tell by how they are around you is how they're feeling. Because I know that, especially in the early days of it, that when I was by myself was when it was the hardest.
Mm. Well, you do such an extraordinary job being there for our congregants, and I'm really glad that you're finding the love and support that you deserve. I know how important your dad was to you, and I'm glad that if you have to go through this, you're going through it with a community that cares about you and loves you and supports you in being where you need to be. What are you most excited about as we celebrate our 175th year as a congregation?
So on March 29th, 5:30 p.m., we have our Cantor's concert. I've been doing these Cantor's concerts basically every year or every other year. And so this year it's focusing on the 175th anniversary. And we're going to be telling the story of Temple Shari Tefillah through music and narration creatively, so that there's some secular music from Broadway that maybe highlights the theme of what was going on at that time, but the music will be anything from Jewish to Broadway and beyond.
Lovely.
And so I'm really excited. And all of our choirs will be singing. We'll have a band. We'll have a professional octet choir. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Wonderful. Do you want to plug who the Cantors are that'll be here?
Sure, yeah. Cantor Bruce Rubin will be coming back, our Cantor Emeritus. Sydney Lazar, our Cantor intern. And Cantor Claire Franco, who was an intern here a number of years ago, back when Cantor Rubin was the Cantor.
Wonderful. We're excited.
Thanks.
How would you say that you live your Judaism outside the walls of the synagogue? Sometimes as Jewish professionals, we are professional Jews, and that's what we do. How do you live your Judaism outside the walls of the synagogue or outside the limits of your work?
So it's interesting. I don't know if this is because I'm a Cantor, but I feel like it's my identity anywhere I am. I don't know if you feel that way as a rabbi.
A little bit,
that
yeah.
It's kind of it's part of who I am now. And so I feel like everything I do, it's there.
What do you love the most about living in New York City?
So culture, obviously. I'm a big opera and Broadway musical fan. So having that so close to home that I can go see shows whenever I want. I don't go as much as I should, but knowing that it's there for me to go whenever I want is great. Being close to Citi Field, as you know, I'm a huge Mets fan. So that is definitely a plus. Also, just the fact that when I grew up in the suburbs, and growing up in the suburbs, I figured the city is a big place. And so when I first moved to New York City, I expected to be just like small and like not know anyone. And within like a couple of weeks of being here, I realized that it's actually, they're a small community. So especially on the Upper East Side, where being a Cantor here, I run into people all over the place, which I happen to love. But even just the other day, I was in the theater district and ran into 2 people like that so the fact that even in a big city, you can run into people anywhere, it just always blows my mind.
The most important question is the last one, and that is, we need your prediction about how many games the Mets are going to win this year.
I think they have a good chance. I think they have a great team. So I'm optimistic. But then again, I'm optimistic every year.
It's the time of the year to be optimistic.
But I'm optimistic.
You think they're going to the playoffs?
I think they can.
Fantastic. That's awesome.
What do you think about the White Sox?
I am also optimistic. I think it's the nature of being a White Sox or a Mets fan that this time of year you're always optimistic, but the White Sox made a bunch of improvements this year, and I think they can go far. So we'll see. Maybe we'll have a Mets-White Sox World Series. That would be
great.
Exciting and a bit of a problem, but we'll figure it out. The problem I will look forward to having. Thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. It's wonderful to be your professional partner and your friend. And we're grateful for everything you do for us, for the congregation.
My pleasure.
All right, everybody, cue the rabbi for the cultural note.
Some folks who I have talked to about this podcast say, oh yeah, I've listened to lots of podcasts, so I'll just add this to my list. And some people have said, what's a podcast? And have become listeners of this podcast. So welcome in either case. Whether you're a longtime podcast listener or you're new to it, I want to invite you to check out another podcast called The College Commons from the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, which is the seminary from which Rabbi Reines and Cantor Kipnis and I were ordained. This past week, the College Common podcast featured Shari Tefillah's very own Dr. Alyssa Gray speaking on the theme of ancient law made modern and spiritual. In addition to being a professor of codes and responsa literature at HUC-JAR, she also recently published a fascinating book called Charity in Rabbinic Judaism, Atonement, Rewards, and Righteousness. The podcast, College Commons, is always a fascinating listen, and Dr. Gray is a phenomenal teacher. I invite you to check it out. My favorite holiday. Okay, it's an occupational hazard. I'm supposed to say all the holidays are my favorite holiday, but if you promise not to tell anyone, I'll tell you that Purim is my favorite holiday, and it's coming this week. And there's a whole bunch of events that we want to invite you and your friends to come to. We have our everyone-friendly Purim spiel on Sunday morning, March 8th at 10:30 a.m. That's acted out by our staff. And this year, the Purim spiel is entitled East Side Story. And it's followed by the Purim Carnival. That's, of course, for kids and grandkids and everyone. Then that afternoon, we have our Tot Purim extravaganza at 4 p.m. And finally, on Monday evening, March 9th at 6:30, we have our adult Megillah reading. We invite you to join us for any and all of these events and bring friends. It's some of the best fun we have all year long. For the Monday evening event, we need you to RSVP because we're providing food and we want to make sure we have food for you. This week's Torah portion is called Tetzaveh, and it starts in the 27th chapter of the book of Exodus. It speaks in large part of the special clothing that was prepared for the priestly class that existed in biblical times. The special garments include the instruction, "You shall make a frontlet of pure gold and engrave on it the seal inscription, Holy to God." Now, we don't have a priestly class anymore, but I think there's still a great message for us in this teaching. What if we treated ourselves and each person that we encountered as if we and they had an inscription engraved that everyone could see that said, Holy to God? What if we treated each person, people we loved, total strangers, even the people that drive us a little batty, as if they were holy to God? I encourage you to try it this week and see how it makes you feel about yourself, most importantly, your partner, your children, or your grandchildren, your boss, your employees, your coworkers, even total strangers. When you look in the mirror, or when you look into the eyes of another human being, imagine that the face in front of you has engraved on its forehead, "Holy to God," and let me know how that experience goes for you. This episode of Commuting with the Rabbi is brought to you by Temple Shari Tefillah, now celebrating its 175th year. We're located at 250 East 79th Street and 2nd Avenue. Shari Tefillah is a spiritual home for all who seek meaning, connection, and purpose. Visit us online at sharitefillahnyc.org. You can also find us on Facebook at Temple Shari Tefillah NYC, and on Instagram at Shari Tefillah. For information about underwriting or advertising on this podcast, please email us at tstcoms, that's COMMS, tstcoms@tstnyc.org. New episodes of Commuting with the Rabbi are available every other Sunday. If you like what you hear, please consider subscribing. It's free. Leaving us a review wherever you get your podcasts would also be much appreciated. We'd love to hear what you think, and we're so glad to have you with us. This episode of Commuting with the Rabbi was executive produced by Kirsten Major and produced by Josh Walker, with engineering and editing by Josh Walker. I'm your host, Rabbi Joel Mosbacher, and until next time, see you in Shul, or on the subway, or both.